Maranello, June 1963. The conference room held 12 men, lawyers, executives, translators, all waiting for one handshake that would change everything. Henry Ford II stood at the head of the table, right hand extended, palm open, professional smile fixed in place. Enzo Ferrari looked at the hand. 30 seconds of silence. Then Ferrari turned, walked to the door, left the room. He never touched Ford's hand. 3 weeks later, Ford declared war. This is the story of what that refusal cost, and why Ferrari never regretted it. The meeting had taken 6 months to arrange. Ford wanted Ferrari, not just the cars, not just the racing team, the entire company, the name, the legacy, everything. For Ferrari, the offer was extraordinary. $18 million, full operational control for 5 years, unlimited racing budget, his own factories, his name still on every car. Every advisor told him to take it. Ferrari was 65 years old. His factory was struggling. Costs were rising. Competition from British teams was intensifying. The company needed capital. Ford was offering not just money, but survival. The negotiations began in January 1963. Ford sent Don Frey, their vice president of car and truck development. Sharp man, understood racing, respected Ferrari's achievements. The first meetings went well. Frey toured the Maranello factory, met the mechanics, watched the cars being built, asked intelligent questions about engine design and aerodynamics. Ferrari appreciated competence, even from Americans. By March, they were discussing numbers. By April, they were drafting contracts. By May, both sides believed the deal would close. Ford told the press they were in advanced discussions with Ferrari regarding a potential partnership. Ferrari's Italian bankers began preparing the paperwork. The final meeting was scheduled for June 18, 1963. Maranello. Ferrari's conference room. Both parties would sign, photographs would be taken, champagne would be opened. Henry Ford II flew to Italy personally. He didn't usually attend these meetings. That's what executives were for. But this was different. This was Ferrari. This was history. Ford wanted to shake Ferrari's hand himself. The meeting began at 10 a.m. Just walked in, sat down, nodded to the room. Don Frey presented the final contract. 247 pages. Every detail negotiated. Every contingency covered. One clause had been added since the previous draft. Page 63, Section 4.2. Ford Motor Company retains final approval over Ferrari racing program budget allocations exceeding $500,000 annually. It was standard corporate language, sensible financial control. Any reasonable business would include it. Ferrari read it 3 times. Then looked up at Frey. "Who decides which races we enter?" Ferrari asked. "You do," Frey said, "within the approved budget. And if the budget doesn't cover the races I choose, then we discuss adjustments." "Discuss," Ferrari repeated. "Yes, meaning Ford decides." Frey hesitated. "Meaning we collaborate on financial decisions." Ferrari closed the contract. "I don't collaborate on racing," he said. The room went quiet. Henry Ford II leaned forward. He'd been listening silently, until now. "Mr. Ferrari," Ford said, his voice calm, measured. "We're offering you $18 million. We're offering to save your company. All we're asking is reasonable financial oversight. That's not collaboration. That's good business." "Good business," Ferrari repeated. "Yes, and if I say no," Ford smiled, not warmly, but professionally, "then you'll spend the next decade watching British teams dominate, while your factory struggles to keep the lights on." It was a threat. Polite, but clear. Ferrari stood. "Gentlemen," he said, "thank you for your time." He walked toward the door. Henry Ford II stood as well. Quickly, moved to intercept Ferrari. "Wait," Ford said. "We can revise that clause. If it's that important to you, we can discuss it." Ferrari stopped. Ford extended his hand. "Let's not end this over one paragraph," Ford said. "We've come too far. Shake my hand. Let's find a solution." Ferrari looked at Ford's hand, then at Ford's face, then back at the hand. The room held its breath. 12 men watching 2 men. One hand extended, one hand still at Ferrari's side. 5 seconds passed. 10, 15. Ferrari's expression didn't change. No anger, no contempt, just observation, like he was studying something scientific. Then he said, very quietly, I don't shake hands with men who think they own me, and walked out. The door closed behind him. Henry Ford II stood with his hands still extended, face red, jaw tight. He lowered his hands slowly, turned to Don Frey. I want to beat him, Ford said. I don't care what it costs. I want to destroy him at Le Mans. Frey nodded. Then we build a racing program, Frey said. No, Ford corrected. We build a war. What happened in that conference room became legend. But what most people don't know is what happened in the 30 seconds before Ferrari refused the handshake. Because in those 30 seconds, Ferrari saw something. He saw Ford smile. Professional, practiced, the smile of a man accustomed to getting what he wants. He saw Ford's posture, confident, entitled, the posture of a man who believes money solves everything. He saw Ford's hand, extended, waiting, expecting to be shaken, and Ferrari realized Ford didn't want a partnership. Ford wanted a purchase. Ford wasn't offering to save Ferrari. Ford was offering to own Ferrari. And the handshake wasn't a greeting, it was a closing, a transaction, the physical seal on a deal that would make Ferrari an employee in his own factory. Ferrari had built cars for 40 years, had survived world wars, economic collapses, the deaths of drivers he'd trained personally, had built a company from nothing but stubbornness and skill. And now this American, this industrialist who'd inherited his company from his grandfather, was standing in Ferrari's factory, in Ferrari's conference room, extending his hand like he was doing Ferrari a favor, like $18 million was generous, like control over racing decisions was reasonable, like Ferrari should be grateful. Ferrari wasn't angry. Anger would have meant he cared about Ford's opinion. He was simply clear. This handshake, if accepted, would be the end of everything Ferrari had built. Not legally, not financially, but spiritually. Because once you shake the hand of a man who thinks he owns you, you've accepted his premise. And Ferrari's entire life had been built on one premise. He owned himself, his cars, his decisions, his failures. Nobody else. So he didn't shake the hand. Not because he was proud. Pride would have meant explaining, justifying, defending. He simply didn't shake it, because the hand represented something he couldn't accept. And explanations were unnecessary. The following week, Ferrari called a meeting with his engineers. Ford is going to build a racing program, Ferrari said. They're going to spend whatever it takes to beat us at Le Mans. Can they? One engineer asked. Yes, Ferrari said. They have unlimited money, unlimited resources. They'll hire the best people, build the best cars. They'll probably succeed. Then what do we do? Ferrari smiled. For the first time since the meeting with Ford, we beat them anyway. The room was silent. How? The engineer asked. Because they're building cars to prove a point, Ferrari said. We're building cars because it's what we do. There's a difference. They'll learn it. Ford launched the GT40 program in July 19. Budget, unlimited. Timeline, aggressive. Goal, singular. Beat Ferrari at Le Mans. They hired Carroll Shelby. Brilliant engineer. Experienced racer. Man who understood what Ford wanted. They built facilities, hired teams, designed prototypes. By 1964, the GT40 was testing. By 1965, it was racing. It failed. Mechanical problems. Engine failures. Transmission issues. The car was fast but unreliable. Ferrari won Le Mans in 1964. In Detroit, Henry Ford II was furious. I thought you said we could beat him, Ford said to Shelby. We can, Shelby said, but not yet. Racing isn't about money. It's about time, experience, learning from failure. How much time? Years. Ford didn't want to hear it, but he kept funding the program. Because now it wasn't about business. It was personal. The man who refused his handshake was still winning. In Maranello, Ferrari watched Ford's efforts with interest. His engineers asked if he was worried. No, Ferrari said, but they're spending millions, building new cars every month, testing constantly. I know. Doesn't that concern you? Ferrari thought about it. Ford thinks racing is a problem to solve, Ferrari said finally. Spend enough money, hire enough people, engineer the right solution. He thinks it's like building a factory. Isn't it? No. Racing is about understanding failure. You can't buy that understanding. You have to earn it. Ford will learn, but it will take time, and it will cost him more than money. What will it cost him? Ferrari smiled slightly, his certainty that everything has a price. 1966, Le Mans. Ford arrived with 3 GT40s. Shelby had rebuilt everything. New engines, new transmissions, new aerodynamics. The cars were fast, faster than Ferrari. Ferrari arrived with 2 330 P3s. Beautiful machines, proven, but older design, less power. The race started. Ford dominated, led for 20 hours. Then, with 4 hours remaining, all 3 Ford cars developed problems. Oil leaks, overheating, mechanical stress from pushing too hard, too long. One by one, they retired. Ferrari won. Again. In the Ford pit, Henry Ford II sat in silence. Shelby approached carefully. "We'll get him next year," Shelby said. Ford didn't respond. He was thinking about that conference room, that extended hand, that quiet refusal, and realizing Ferrari had known something Ford hadn't, that the man desperate enough to win will always lose, to the man patient enough to learn. 1967. Le Mans. Ford returned. Same cars, same team, but different approach. This time, they didn't push for speed. They pushed for endurance. They paced the cars, managed tire wear, planned pit stops with obsessive precision, and they won. Ford 1-2-3 finish. Total domination. Ferrari didn't finish. Both cars retired with mechanical failures. In Maranello, Ferrari's engineers were devastated. Ferrari was quiet. "They learned," he said finally. "Yes, good. Now racing will be interesting again." The engineers stared at him. "You're not upset?" one asked. "Why would I be upset? Ford spent 4 years and tens of millions of dollars learning what we already knew. Now they're worthy opponents. That's not a loss, that's a compliment. But we lost." This year, Ferrari said. "We'll see about next year." Henry Ford II gave interviews after the 1967 win. Journalists asked about Ferrari. "We proved," Ford said, "that American engineering and American determination can beat anyone, including Ferrari." "Do you think Ferrari regrets not selling to you?" one journalist asked. Ford paused. "I don't know," he said finally, "but I know I spent 4 years trying to beat a man who could have been working for me. So maybe I'm the one who should be asking about regrets." That quote made newspapers worldwide. Someone showed it to Ferrari. He read it, smiled slightly, said nothing. But that evening, he wrote a letter to Henry Ford II. The letter was never published. Ford kept it private until his death. But those who saw it said it contained one sentence: "Congratulations on learning what winning costs. Now you understand why I couldn't sell." Ford never responded. But in 1968, when Ferrari's factory faced another financial crisis, Ford quietly arranged a loan through intermediary banks. Enough to keep Ferrari operational. No strings attached, no publicity. Ferrari never acknowledged it publicly. But in 1969, when Ford engineers visited Maranello for a technical conference, Ferrari personally gave them a tour of the factory. At the end, one Ford engineer said, "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Ferrari." Ferrari shook his hand. It was the first time he'd shaken hands with anyone from Ford Motor Company. The engineer mentioned it to Ford later. "He shook your hand?" Ford asked. "Yes, sir." "Did he say anything?" "Just thank you for visiting." Ford smiled. "He shook your hand because you weren't trying to buy him. You were respecting him. There's a difference." "Do you think he would have shaken your hand in 1963 if you'd approached it differently?" the engineer asked. Ford thought for a long time. "No," he said finally, "because in 1963, I wasn't respecting him. I was buying him. He saw that. I didn't. That's why he walked away, and why it took me 4 years and millions of dollars to understand what he already knew. Some things can't be purchased. They can only be earned." The handshake Ferrari refused became part of racing legend. People still debate it. Was Ferrari too proud? Was Ford too arrogant? Who was right? But those who understood Ferrari knew the truth. It was never about pride. It was about identity. Ferrari had spent his entire life building something that was his vision, his decisions, his failures, his victories. The moment he shook Ford's hand in that conference room, with that contract on the table, he would have become someone else's employee, someone else's asset, someone else's problem to manage. And Ferrari understood something profound. Once you accept that transaction, you can't undo it. The money doesn't matter. The control clauses don't matter. What matters is that you've agreed to let someone else define your value. And your value, Ferrari believed, wasn't something others could define. It was something you demonstrated. Through work, through results, through the cars you built, and the races you won or lost. Ford's hand, extended in that conference room, wasn't just a greeting. It was a question: will you let me define your value? Ferrari's refusal wasn't just a rejection. It was an answer: no, I'll define it myself. That's why he walked out. That's why he never regretted it. That's why, years later, when Ford engineers visited with respect rather than money, Ferrari shook their hands freely. Because respect can be shared, value can be acknowledged. But ownership, identity, purpose, those can't be bought. They can only be protected. Ferrari died in Henry Ford II died in They never met again after that day in 19. But both men, in different interviews late in life, were asked about that moment. Ford said, "I learned more from the handshake Ferrari refused than from any deal I ever closed." Ferrari said, "I learned nothing from refusing Ford. I already knew what I was protecting. The handshake would have taught me nothing except what it feels like to betray yourself." Two men, two perspectives, two legacies. Ford built an automotive empire. Ferrari built a racing legend. Ford's company survived him. Ferrari's name became immortal. Both were right in their way. But only one walked out of that conference room with his identity intact. And only one knew, the moment that hand extended, that the cost of shaking it was higher than any price Ford could offer. The conference room in Maranello still exists. It's part of the Ferrari Museum now. Tour guides tell the story, point to the table where the contract sat, describe the silence, the extended hand, the quiet refusal. Some visitors think Ferrari was foolish. He could have been rich. Others think Ferrari was brave. He stood up to Ford. But a few, usually older visitors, people who've built something themselves, understand differently. They look at that conference room and see something else. A man who knew that the moment you shake the wrong hand, you've agreed to become someone you're not. And they nod quietly, because they understand what Ferrari understood. Some handshakes are greetings, and some are surrenders. Knowing the difference is what separates people who build legacies from people who sell them. Ferrari refused to sell his, even when the price was $18 million, even when the hand belonged to Henry Ford II, even when everyone told him he was wrong. He simply looked at that hand, understood what it represented, and walked away. Not because he was too proud to compromise, but because he was too clear about what compromise would cost. And 30 seconds of silence in a conference room became 40 years of racing history, all because one man knew when not to shake hands. Have you ever walked away from something everyone told you to accept? Have you ever known that saying yes would cost more than saying no?